the tension that exploded between Hamilton and Norris after the Chinese sprint. Stick around until the end, because I'm going to break down everything that happened. Every glance, every word, every unspoken grudge between these two British titans. And hey, if you're one of those who knows that Lewis Hamilton deserves that long-awaited 8th crown, the one that would seal his name forever as the greatest Formula One driver in history, then smash that follow button. Let's ride this wave together. At first glance, the Chinese Grand Prix weekend looked like just another tick on the ever-grueling Formula One calendar. Another tightly scheduled, micromanaged event in a season already overflowing with travel, drama, and data. It was a sprint weekend too, and those tend to be wild cards. Short, sharp, full of chaos, but usually designed to inject a little spice into otherwise stale weekends. Shanghai hadn't hosted a Grand Prix in years, and its return was supposed to be nostalgic, ceremonial, even. But nothing about this weekend followed the script. What was expected to be routine quickly veered into something far more combustible. The Shanghai circuit, with its sweeping corners and brutal tire degradation, refused to play nice. Teams scrambled. Engineers second-guessed. Strategists rewrote plans mid-session. The atmosphere? Electric, unpredictable, like a storm building behind the clouds. And under all that, there was something else. A quiet storm was brewing. Not on the track, not in the timing sheets, but in the paddock. In the hidden corridors of team motorhomes and within the cold, impersonal meeting rooms where futures are decided and careers are broken. And then, boom. It wasn't a crash. It wasn't a dodgy steward call or some FIA scandal. No. It was a conversation. A brief but volatile encounter between Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris, one that would ignite murmurs in every garage from Ferrari to McLaren, hijack podcast episodes that hadn't even been planned, and dominate Twitter spaces before fans had even seen a replay. It happened in the most unsuspecting place. A nondescript corner near the McLaren hospitality suite, not far from a designer espresso cart humming beneath a barely functioning fan. No cameras, no PR handlers, no scripted media chatter. Just two men. Two British drivers. Two different eras colliding. On one side, the legend himself. Lewis Hamilton. 7 world championships. Now wearing Ferrari red, a color that somehow made him look even more dangerous, even more mythic, as if he'd stepped straight out of a gladiator's tale. He stood there, not scrolling his phone, not barking telemetry to a race engineer. He was waiting. Poised. Like a man who knows something is about to go down. And then came Norris. As always, quiet, reserved, but impossible not to notice. Headphones around his neck. Hoodie on. Eyes focused. Fresh from a data debrief, mind still racing with lap deltas and brake traces. His body language. Tense. Alert. Like a soldier walking into a room he didn't want to be in, but couldn't afford to avoid. They weren't supposed to cross paths like this. Not by coincidence. Hamilton didn't just happen to be standing there. And Norris didn't just happen to show up at that precise moment. There was intention behind it all. A confrontation waiting to happen. Words waiting to be said. Whatever was exchanged, barely more than a handful of sentences, didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to be public. But it cut deep. The kind of cutting that lingers long after the words are gone. People nearby sensed it. Mechanics paused. PR folks stopped mid-step. Something shifted. Tension wrapped around the paddock like smoke from an unseen fire. By nightfall, the story had spread. Was it about a move during the sprint? A lack of respect? A deeper rivalry finally bubbling to the surface? No one knew the full story. But everyone felt it. And just like that, the weekend was no longer about Shanghai's return to the calendar. It was about something far bigger. A clash of generations. A brewing rivalry between one man chasing immortality and another desperate to escape his shadow. Subscribe if you believe that Lewis Hamilton must get that 8th title, if you believe history owes him that final coronation. Because after this weekend, it's clear, Hamilton's not just racing for himself anymore. He's racing to remind every single person in that paddock, especially the younger ones, that his story isn't finished yet. And Lando? He might have just walked into the lion's den, without even realizing it. His eyebrows remained knit together, the kind of expression born not from confusion but calculation. It was likely he had seen something in the data, perhaps something unsettling, or maybe something too promising to ignore. Whatever it was, it stuck with him. And though the tension didn't scream out at first glance, it pulsed beneath the surface, hidden in the pauses, in the silences that stretched just a second too long. Hamilton was the one who broke the silence, his voice cutting through the charged stillness with unsettling precision. "It feels strange being back in China, doesn't it?" The tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. It lived somewhere in the gray zone between casual indifference and deliberate provocation. Norris didn't turn his head. He kept his eyes fixed on a vague point in the distance, somewhere between the paddock and nothing at all. He acknowledged the comment with a soft agreement. He hadn't raced here in Formula One before, but he could feel the essence of it. This circuit had old-school DNA, he said. It had character. He loved that. Then came a pause, longer than necessary, and heavier than it should have been. Hamilton responded with a slow, considered nod. He spoke again, this time about the car. Something about how it felt different here. Ferrari had been a complicated beast all season, moments of brilliance smothered by a mountain of effort. They were improving, yes, but every step forward came with the weight of grinding repetition. It wasn't small talk. It was a test. Norris didn't miss the bait. He replied that he had seen it, Hamilton struggling with the car, especially in Sector 2. Those awkward medium-speed corners required constant micro-corrections. The rear still looked unstable, nervous, biting back with every throttle input. That was when Hamilton turned to face him fully. The curve of his mouth carried a dangerous ambiguity, a smirk that could have turned into a snarl at any moment. He asked if Norris had been watching his onboards. Norris didn't flinch. He said he liked learning, especially from the missteps of others. That shifted the air. The atmosphere between them hardened. It didn't explode, not yet, but it changed shape. Near them, a McLaren mechanic who'd been sipping a protein shake suddenly remembered he had a task elsewhere. Another crew member raised his phone to pretend he was distracted, scrolling aimlessly. Nobody wanted to be caught witnessing a conversation that was clearly no longer just a conversation. Hamilton's tone grew sharper, like tempered steel. He asked if Norris was sure about all of it, because there was no sense standing here, chasing titles, fighting battles, unless he was fully in it. Norris still didn't raise his voice. He didn't need volume. He had precision. He replied with something that echoed like a blade unsheathed. It was Hamilton who had taught them that, or at least he used to. The words landed like a paper cut, not deep, but stinging precisely because of how fine and deliberate they were. A flicker of tension worked its way into Hamilton's jaw. Subtle, barely noticeable. But there, for those trained to see it, for those who understood the language of pressure. He acknowledged that Norris had pace. That much was clear. But pace faded. Pressure didn't. That was the real test. Norris remained still, unshaken. He said they'd find out soon enough which one cracked first. And that was it. The moment. The line in the sand. No longer a passive exchange between colleagues. No longer just two athletes bonded by nationality and sponsorship deals. This was legacy versus uprising. The shadow of dominance colliding with the scent of something new, something inevitable. Hamilton paused, then shared something no one expected. A story. A memory. Shanghai, 2007. His rookie year. The one where he lost the title over a single mistake. A pit stop misjudged by inches. Slick tires on a damp track. A split-second decision that cost him everything. He said he had never forgotten it. And then he looked at Norris, not with anger, but with something deeper. Something worn and sharp. He told Norris he might think he's ready for this fight. But he hadn't bled for it yet. Norris didn't recoil. Didn't blink. But something shifted behind his eyes. An internal shift. Like an engine mode changing mid-race. He said he didn't need to bleed. He only needed to hit the shot Hamilton missed. Silence followed, but not the kind that empties a room. The kind that fills it. With weight. With echoes. With meaning. Hamilton didn't argue. He nodded. Not in approval. Not in surrender. Just in understanding. Then he turned and walked away. Each step deliberate. The sound of his Ferrari boots tapping against the concrete floor like punctuation marks closing a brutal chapter. Norris didn't follow. He remained by the railing, watching Hamilton vanish around the corner. His face gave nothing away. But his eyes? They had changed. Something had ignited. Not just the fire of competition. Something colder. Deeper. Like a man who'd finally understood what this fight demanded, and who was willing to meet it. In the garages, whispers filled the air like smoke. McLaren personnel muttered in hushed tones, in English and Spanish. A Ferrari engineer stood still, saying nothing. But silence, sometimes, screams the loudest. Above, the sky was beginning to darken. But the real storm wasn't forming in the clouds. It was already here. In the cracks forming between legacies and threats. Will Buxton later tweeted a vague comment about two lions circling the same prey. The internet went wild. Forums exploded. Grainy video was picked apart by body language experts. Lip readers tried to reconstruct the exchange. But the words didn't matter as much as the energy. By the time the sprint began, no one cared about lap times. They were watching a battlefield. Hamilton and Norris didn't speak again that day. But on the circuit, they didn't have to. They danced a quiet war. Predator versus insurgent. In the driver's briefing, they sat apart, 2 chairs between them. When one entered the paddock, the other exited. And yet, fate dragged them together again in Q2. Hamilton in front. Norris behind. DRS open. Purple sectors. Radio chatter charged with tension. But Norris lifted. Not because of a slow delta. Not because of traffic. Because escalation didn't belong here. Not yet. Something greater was coming. Everyone knew it. This wasn't about points. Not anymore. It was about dominance. It was about inheritance. And the scariest part? This was only the prologue. Later that evening, under the flickering fluorescent haze of the paddock lights, reporters buzzed like insects near the garages, microphones twitching in their hands. Inside, the atmosphere thickened. Tension like hydraulic fluid. Lando stood alone, resting against a carbon workbench, sipping from a bottle. No performance. No bravado. Just quiet. And then he said it. One line. Simple. Cold. He wasn't sure Ferrari could give Lewis what Mercedes once did. That ship, in his words, had sailed. Hamilton blinked. Once. Slow. Mechanical. Calculated. That wasn't a statement. It was a sniper round. An identity strike. He didn't respond immediately. He turned like a storm does, silently, with force brewing beneath calm. His eyes narrowed, not from rage, but precision. The look of a chess master planning his next trap. Endgame mode had begun. Lewis leaned forward slightly, his voice slicing through the noise like the edge of a scalpel. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Lando didn't flinch. His shoulders rose in a mild shrug, his gaze never leaving the telemetry screen in front of him. Nothing personal, he said, a touch too calm. You were a monster in the W12. Untouchable. But this is Ferrari. He gestured at the glowing display. Scarlet tire degradation graphs danced across the monitor like a silent warning. Even God can't save rubber that melts under pressure. That wasn't conversation. That was declaration of war. Lewis took a step forward. Barely half a pace. But it was enough. Enough to collapse the thin membrane between playful banter and brutal judgment. A PR handler, thumb frozen mid-scroll, stared wide-eyed. Two engineers working on a rear wing froze, tools in hand, like statues caught mid-swing. The garage stopped breathing. "You have no idea what it takes to build a legacy," came Hamilton's reply, voice like dry ice. "You've never led a team. You've never opened a season carrying the weight of entire nations, of billion-dollar empires watching your every split time. You think TikTok montages and a couple of podiums make you dangerous?" Lando's jaw tensed. His reply came too fast to be rehearsed. "I never claimed to be you. But I also didn't need FIA gray zones to win." That was the trigger. Lewis leaned in closer. Foreheads almost aligned. The era of helmets and visors was long gone in that instant. What remained was bare skin and raw pride. "Let me tell you something," Lewis said, his voice almost affectionate, which only made it more lethal. "If I had that McLaren right now, you'd be 3 wins and 1 pole behind. Easily. You've got pace, kid. I'll give you that. But you don't have venom. You haven't bled yet. And if you ever dare to compare your potential to my legacy again, win AF ****ing race first. No shouting. No theatrics. Just stillness. The kind that arrives seconds before a hurricane drowns a city." Lando didn't blink. Didn't twitch. His voice was steady. "I'm not chasing your legacy," he said slowly. "I'm building mine. And I won't need 5 team changes to do it." That hit. Not in muscle or bone, but in myth. The impact was metaphysical. It reverberated through the scaffolding of Hamilton's legend. Nobody in the garage exhaled. A hot mic from Sky Sports captured every syllable. But this wasn't just about ego. This had roots. Back in 2021, when McLaren quietly sought full factory Mercedes engines, it was rumored, whispered, really, that Hamilton had advised Toto not to give them full support. Lando had never addressed it. But he had never forgotten. In 2023, during a closed Pirelli test, Norris had outpaced Hamilton on identical compounds. The session was private. But the data existed. Lewis had seen it. Lando knew he had. Now, in 2025, Ferrari stood shaky in the midfield. McLaren was rising. The weight of all that silence cracked. And then came Charles. Leclerc stepped between them with the ease of a man used to defusing bombs in silk gloves. He was a paradox wrapped in diplomacy, a gladiator who wore kindness like armor. He didn't speak loudly or gently. He spoke with finality. "This isn't Twitter. This isn't the media pen. We don't throw shade before lights out. Prove it on track." Lando chuckled under his breath. "Maybe tell your teammate that," he muttered, just loud enough. Hamilton's eyes went darker. "Tell him," he replied, his voice soaked in venom. "Tell him to respect the throne." The words didn't fade. They hung there, suspended like fuel vapor, waiting for a spark. Lando turned and walked. Not retreating. Not fearing. Just stating, "This isn't over." Charles pivoted toward Lewis, his voice lower now. "Don't let him inside your head," he warned. "He's not trying to rattle you. He's studying you. Waiting for cues. Lewis didn't reply. He stared past Leclerc, past the paddock, into that private place only champions know, a mental sanctum carved out of sacrifice, isolation, and an unbearable standard. "I don't care what he wants," he said eventually. "He won't rewrite what I've done." Charles didn't blink. "Then stop fighting shadows. Race him. Beat him. That's the only language this paddock respects." Lewis said nothing. He simply vanished. No nod. No handshake. Just a scarlet ghost disappearing into the machinery of race day. 37 minutes later, deep inside Ferrari's motorhome, Lewis sat alone. The telemetry screen glowed. Pressure curves. Brake traces. Throttle overlays. Not just numbers. Truths. Still in his race suit. Gloves on. Sweat clinging to him, not from heat, but from something colder. The door opened without a knock. No entourage. No press. It was Fred Vasseur. He carried no tablet. No laptop. Only a folded piece of paper. Not digital. Not modern. Old. Confidential. He placed it on the table, said nothing. Lewis looked down and recognized the seal instantly. Not Ferrari. Not FIA. Something above. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Fred didn't blink. "I didn't. It was delivered. No sender. Just one instruction. Do not share." Outside, an engine roared to life. But in that room, time stopped. Lewis picked up the document with a hand that refused to tremble. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the contents. And something fundamental shifted. The world didn't spin. It broke. Because what was written there had nothing to do with racing. It had everything to do with the next 48 hours. And if Lewis made the wrong decision, the consequences wouldn't be measured in lap times. They would bleed, silently, behind the scenes. He didn't sit. He couldn't. He stood still. His helmet rested at the table's edge. Gloves still gripping. His breath came in waves, not like a sprinter's. Like a boxer's after 12 rounds. The door clicked shut behind him. He didn't flinch. Engineers exchanged uneasy glances. No one dared speak. Even Angela, who had witnessed every emotional extreme from him for over a decade, kept her distance. This wasn't rage. This was deeper. This was tectonic. Today he hadn't crossed the line. He had redrawn it. When Vasseur returned, he didn't raise his voice. Didn't throw a laptop. He simply faced the 7-time world champion and spoke with the softness of a blade wrapped in silk. "Tell me this isn't what you've become." Hamilton didn't look up. Not immediately. He clenched his jaw. Then finally, his voice cracked through the tension. "He thinks this is a game. He wants to carve his name into history by tearing mine down." Fred didn't blink. "He's carving it, Lewis. But not with skill." He paused. "He's doing it with your permission. Because you've given him silence. You've given him theater. And now the world is watching the myth unravel." Lewis's voice was steel. "I don't care what they see." Fred exhaled. Disappointment leaked into the space between them. "Then you're more lost than I thought." That was the spark. Lewis stepped forward. Controlled. "Close. Don't lecture me on legacy. I forged mine in silence. In sweat. In solitude. I wasn't gifted hype. I earned every crown. And I won't let a TikTok darling with a pretty face and a British accent piss on what I bled to give this sport." The air dropped 10 degrees. Fred leaned forward, just enough. If you stoop to his level, then he's already won. And Lewis knew it. But it was too late. Because the race had been run. And the world had already seen. What dominated the headlines wasn't the overtake, though it should have been. On lap 13, Lewis made a move so impossibly daring it looked like simulation footage. He braked nearly 8 meters later than what physics claimed was possible. Lando had the inside, but Hamilton took the corner like it had been drawn for him alone. Tire smoke. Madness. A ballet of destruction. It was Hamilton vintage, the kind of move only one human alive could execute. But that's not what trended. What went viral was the onboard camera. Crystal clear. A raised middle finger. 2 undeniable words. Broadcast over team radio. F*** off. That wasn't strategy. That was war. Mercedes comms went into red alert. Crisis protocols activated. All interviews cancelled. Hamilton was escorted through alternate corridors. Cool-down mode triggered, usually reserved for crashes or trauma. But the cameras were relentless. And when drivers gathered in the pre-podium room, the air was suffocating. Hamilton. Norris. Perez. 3 storms. Checo drifted like a ghost, present but trying not to exist. Lando leaned against the wall, arms folded, legs loose. Pretending calm. But his fingers betrayed him, twitching, flexing. Hamilton paced like a panther. Helmet still in hand, visor down. Not for safety, to hide. Then something happened. The audio cut. But the cameras kept rolling. Lando said something. A smirk formed. Hamilton froze. Turned. 3 slow steps. No threat. Just the deadly calm of a predator. Checo stepped between them. Silent. A wall. A man who had seen explosions before and knew exactly when to stop one. A water bottle flew, not at anyone. Just thrown. A plug snapped. A chair scraped back. Someone opened the door and froze, like they had walked into a firefight. We may never know what was said. But rumors ignited. That Hamilton told Norris, "You've got a fast car, but you're playing a dangerous game." And Lando replied with ice. "You're just angry because no one fears you anymore." That line struck like a punch to the chest. Because it felt true. And Hamilton felt it. On the podium, they weren't racers. They were relics and futures clashing in silence. Hamilton never looked Lando's way. The champagne exploded. Only Checo raised his bottle. Hamilton left his untouched. Lando let it soak his suit. No smile. No mockery. Just silence. As if his work was done. No words exchanged. Not on the podium. Not in the press conference. Not in the VIP lounge hours later, where they sat on opposite sides of the room, separated by security and unresolved rage. But this wasn't the end. Hours later, a blurry photo appeared. Posted by accident. Or maybe not. Taken by someone inside McLaren. Deleted in seconds. But the screenshots had already set the internet on fire. It showed Hamilton. Alone. Still in race boots. Phone in hand. Watching something. The caption. Reviewing the moment. Some said he was re-watching the overtake. Others believed he was looking at the finger. Wondering if he went too far. Or not far enough. Meanwhile, in Woking, Norris posted an Instagram story. 15 seconds. No words. Just his helmet on a shelf. The camera zoomed in slowly. In the background, a Taylor Swift song played. The man. Message received. The fans understood. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Shanghai wasn't about tire wear. It wasn't about strategy. It was about power. Legacy. And the terrifying moment when the past smashes into the future. And neither flinches.